Hello and welcome to Homegrown, Soccer Yanks home for domestic soccer. I am your host, Dan DeRocha. With me tonight, I have our co-host, executive producer, mind behind Homegrown, Jay. We haven't done a Homegrown in some time. I'm glad to have you tonight. How's it going?
Well, we've been doing lots of homegrowns, but we haven't been doing them together. So we both been keeping ourselves busy with the podcast. But it's been good. It feels good to finally talk to you in a while.
Absolutely. We've both been chugging away this last February. Our month dedicated to soccer media. We haven't had a chance. I mean, we've emailed and this and that, but we want to put a bow on it. I want to talk to you about the interviews that we had this month. We had some great interviews, some great guys that are powerful or up and coming in the soccer media. In summary, what did you get from our little experiment? Where is soccer media today?
The biggest thing for me, and I guess I feel like I'm a little bit of a traditionalist when I think about the two biggest ways to determine popularity in sports or popularity in general, is I look at newspapers or publications. I'm still kind of a person who cares when something is print. Like, no matter how much I get published myself on Soccer Yanks or other websites, my goal is to get published in a magazine and or a newspaper, and that to me is what matters to me more, is that there's not coverage in newspaper. And I think having that talk with Tadawal, who expressed that the coverage in newspapers, he gave us a list of big time newspapers around the country. The Philadelphia Inquirer doesn't have a beat writer. The Dallas Morning News, the Boston Globe, the Chicago Tribune, the Denver Post, the New York Star Ledger, those are all newspapers with at least 280,000 circulations, and they don't have beat writers. And partially is because, and talking to Brian Bunk, the historian, about this, is not as much an issue with soccer as it is issue with just general problem with newspapers. There's not enough money. They're hemorrhaging cash. They're having a hard time putting together these big, large newspapers. And the first thing that's getting cut, or the thing that's really hurting for sports-wise, is soccer, despite having good college teams and pro teams around.
Now, I agree, but in a general sense, exactly from what you're saying, newspapers are dying. They're failing or folding, or maybe they're having to change their models, looking for putting the content online and charging. Is it actually maybe in soccer's benefit that soccer media really is an internet thing? Where they're already front runners, they're already set the stage early and are growing from the ground up, versus becoming latecomers to the game. I mean, is there an advantage there? I know that you have, being a media guy, background wise, you do have you do believe in the traditional media, but we see it every day. Only like the really, really big boys are still doing okay. They're not even doing great, and the rest of them are all struggling.
Newspapers still have a place in this country, and not just people reading newspapers, the general public reading newspapers, but working in a radio station, working in a television station. In the morning, you got the local newspapers, you open up the broadsheet, and you saw what was on the front cover, and then you kind of worked your way from there to figure out what was going to be the feature of the day, what was going to be the news story of the day, especially if you're doing the evening news. So that does matter in some situations. But I think the biggest thing about newspapers that hurts is an everyday occurrence, and you still have some cachet to work for the Washington Post. When Stephen Goss calls somebody, he gets the answer because he works for the Washington Post. That's not the same when, no offense to bloggers on SB Nation, but they don't get the same kind of access, and they don't get the same kind of immediate response from these teams, because their readership's not there, and the readerships are going to go to games anyway. They're going to watch games anyway. They're not getting the broad general public that the newspapers get.
No, I would agree. I would agree with your sentiment. The blogger doesn't have the kind of pull or the backing really to have that kind of pull. I think it would have been the only thing that we didn't cover, and I wish we had a chance to get somebody from a 442 or a Howler or an 8x8, one of the high-end magazines where it's kind of not it's not exactly newspaper, but it is also something that is you're going to pay a premium buck for. People that are seeking out this information are willing to cough up some money, but they're also getting a really nice polished product. There's beautiful photos or beautiful illustrations. The articles are not. It's not just you're not getting a news update. You're getting a thought out feature article, multiple feature articles. So that would have been a nice thing to look at, because I think maybe that's the other. Maybe we'll never get newspaper in soccer, but we'll have the niche high-end magazine, and then we'll have a multitude of internet sources.
Yeah, there is a like you said, there's a premium to these newspaper to these magazines, and the thing is though, there's not many of them. And I reached out to somebody from a magazine. I'm not going to specify who it was, and I never got a reply back. And that was common in this process. You reach out to a lot of people. Sometimes you get people who are happy to talk to you. Sometimes you're not, and it's nothing about our show or about that individual who I emailed not getting back to us. But I think the biggest thing was I didn't have a lot of options of who to email. I really only emailed one person in the United States who ran a magazine, and that was kind of the only person I really felt would have had an interesting voice to really talk to us. So I think it's yes, you get that polished papers, you get that not just polished, you get articles that are scrubbed and scrutinized and fact checked over and over and over again. That really is a different thing other than just like these quick hit stories that that I write or other people write, just for really to be a source of content or a source of just information. It's a different. It's almost like a human interest story or a really strong feature.
Now, knowing these issues, knowing the concerns of newspaper is, and your point being that the newspaper has traditionally, and it probably still leads the discussion for other media. What is the future then? Where is soccer media going? Do you see us hurdling this and getting into newspapers, or is it going to be an alternate route, or is it going to have to be an alternate route?
I question where we would be soccer media today, if there was not Fox Sports 2 or 3 different ESPNs, or if there wasn't a need to fill content. I wonder where it is, because there's very few people who actually believe in soccer in the big media, other than say John Skipper from ESPN, who for a long time believed in soccer and was willing to put soccer out there and let it grow. If it wasn't for the fact that these guys just need hours to fill in a day, I kind of question where it would be. Yes, there's lots of stuff out there online. I am listening to 2 or 3 podcasts almost in a day for soccer stuff, and maybe up to a week of maybe 6 or 7 things a week for soccer related podcasts. And that's great, because at the time, and when I don't have the time, it's going to be a lot harder to follow. If I don't know where to go, it's going to be a lot harder to follow. And if the MLS and every other league in general wants to grow, they're going to have to figure out a way to get those people who don't A, know how to find the information, or B, know how to access the information. Because a lot of people just don't know how to use podcasts. Even people our age that don't. It's just like, oh, there's iTunes for music and there's nothing for podcasts. It's not really. It's like it was a niche thing that you really have to go out and seek still. Almost like not as bad as boxing, but it's pretty close to what boxing is right now.
I agree. The podcast is still unique, but I think the success of recently the recent big media success of Serial from This American Life put it on the it's been put podcast kind of on the map. You have big names now as far as outside of the sports world that are making some waves. I wouldn't be shocked if the podcast in the next 10 years or so doesn't replace radio, or at least radio doesn't essentially adopt the podcast and put podcasts on the radio in reverse and eliminate the actual people in the station. That being said, let's move on to a big issue that is, and this is very related. I want to segue. This is very related because the CBA right now has expired as of the end of the year. They're negotiating, but the coverage just doesn't exist. Uh, It's crazy to me to think that arguably the fourth biggest sports league in the country, depending on how you measure it, give or take or whatever, attendance, so on and so forth, is getting zero attention. And we're looking at a few days from, right today is the 27th of February. The league starts in 8 days. I mean, it's almost the end of the day already, so maybe let's say a week. We're looking at a potential strike, and no one's talking about it. They haven't talked about it for 2 days, and there's like no information coming out.
Yeah, and I think this has to go with another really a hallmark of media right now, which is still Sports Center. People still go for their still go to Sports Center for news when it comes to all sports, and it's not being covered on ESPN. It's not getting covered ESPN television. I had this discussion with Jonathan Tannenwald, and I said ESPN. That's not true. Jeff Carlisle is really the only person doing quality work on the CBA. He's on ESPN FC. But outside of him, and that's the webpage, and that's not even the ESPN proper webpage. That's a special webpage just for soccer, and that's not even on the front of ESPN FC. I had to go to the MLS page on ESPN FC just to get that information. That's how far down it was buried. But that article this week by him was the most important piece of information we got in almost 2 months regarding the CBA. So there's no pressure on the owners by the public because there's no coverage. The biggest thing regarding TV is are the media company ESPN, Fox, are they going to go out there and are they going to pressure these people to come up with an agreement? Because if the salary cap is say doubled, and unless you're happy doubling the salary cap, do you think that ESPN and Univision and Fox really care about free agency? They don't care less about the bureaucratic system of the league. They want a season. They want content. And are they going to put pressure on there? And we don't know that. We don't know what's going on because one, reporter covering the talks worked for ESPN, and two, MLSsoccer.com is doing nothing in terms of covering it. They have not mentioned the CBA once. And I listen to a lot of their podcasts. I go on their website every day, and they have not covered it once.
In preparation for tonight's podcast, I was scouring the internet for CBA coverage, and I purposely I was like, I'm gonna just look through MLS Soccer. The last big piece of info came out about 2 days ago from I believe it was Jeff Carlisle, and I'm like, let's see if they even just talked about it. That right now, and the big piece of information was that okay, they brought in a mediator and they're gonna talk the small points first, and then tackle the big points later, which to me sounds the most asinine thing I could imagine, but I'm sure they have their reasons. Nothing. I couldn't find anything. It's like, and this is actually, to me, this exemplifies why, almost exemplifies to me why, part of the CBA negotiation and free agency, the dismantling of the single entity, there's too much power in the organization. If the biggest media coverage that they get is their own, that they generate themselves, there's never a bad word put in. I read a different article that quoted Deloy Hansen, the owner of Real Salt Lake, and he says he gets a letter every week from Commissioner Don Garber warning, it's not just him, but all the owners, warning them that there's a $250,000 fine if they offer too much information about what's going on behind closed doors. That is ridiculous. That's ridiculous. So, to me, that's like one of the biggest reasons why I think we need to declaw the head office here.
Yeah, that's actually a common practice. I remember that was happening through the NBA strike, or the NBA negotiations, I should say. And actually, I'm online right now, and I just found some news from Stephen Goff on the Washington Post website. He's saying that there is labor negotiations on Sunday, and that's another meeting. That's probably going to be one of the bigger meetings before the season starts. and hopefully something will come out of it. But what happens if nothing comes out of it? There's, who's going to cover this? Who on ESPN and Fox are going to cover this? Now, during this whole time, I'm talking about ESPN and Fox, and I kind of feel bad because I don't understand Spanish, and I'm not watching the coverage on the Spanish channels, and they could be talking about this a lot, and they could be presenting this to a lot of people. But that might also say something too, is that people, what they see as a key demographic might be the wrong demographic. Maybe the demographic might be the Spanish listeners to kind of go, or the Spanish viewers to kind of go on a little thing about the media here. But how are fans going to make their voices heard? How are players who are not just the big names like Bradley and Josie Altidore talking to the people and expressing to them why free agency is important? Because I don't think a lot of people understand that free agency is important. When we talk to Evan Ream, he says in his articles that he has to explain the MLS system of single entity in most of his pieces. He has to explain the system that there's no free agency and people have no idea what he's talking about. And he has to go through this process of explaining it every time. And I'm curious if you go to a regular game and just poll people, who knows about single entity or who knows about there's no free agency? How many people in the stands would actually know that? And how many people who have tickets for their first game of the season actually knows that there's a risk of there not being a game?
I would argue that that the fans maybe in a few, in the supporter section probably know what the deal is, but a vast majority of everyone else, I do not believe that everyone that goes to MLS matches right now is aware that opening day may not happen. That's concerning. That's very concerning about the coverage. But let's actually move on to the actual details of the CBA, of really what's going to be the holdup here. The clear thing that's been said by a few players, Michael Bradley in particular, free agency is what the players want. They want free agency internally, at least internally, and in essence, from even from a legalese issue and from a movement of player issue that will eliminate the single entity as we understand it to be right now. Is this going to be the do or die? Is this going to actually happen, Jay?
To me, I wonder how many of the new owners want to go out and spend money and go out and say, outbid a quality player against a rival, and don't really care. As long as there is a hard cap in place for, say, $6 million, whatever it's going to be, and they put that cost, they bake that cost into the system, into their books, I don't think they care. I don't think they should care. If it's a hard cap and you bake it into the cost, and I don't say maybe you keep the DP system if you want, or maybe adjust it. As long as you have cost prediction, I don't understand what the issue is. I understand it keeps the cost lower because you get the key players for under contract, even though the contract expire. It's already, you figure out these plans ahead of time. These are big boy companies with big boy money. And if you can't figure this stuff out, I'm not sure you should be in the sport business.
Well, I think, Jay, the issue is not that I don't think the issue is that they aren't capable of managing that kind of system. I think that they got into soccer because they didn't have to. Meaning, everyone has seen what's happened in NBA, the power of the player. Even, the NFL, I think the NFL still keeps their thumb pretty hard on the player. Baseball player salaries have skyrocketed. I think Major League Soccer being sold to an investor. Now let's just not talking about MLS being sold to a fan. MLS being sold to an investor, an American investor that may not give a rat's ass about soccer itself, is looking at it as a revenue source, and one that has the assets, the players are under contract, even once their contract is up, has a low cap, and does pretty decent in attendance if you're getting the right market. I think that I think the problem is they've attracted too many of the owners, the owners that wanted the ride it out easy way. And it's not that they're not capable of it. It's not that they weren't prepared for this when it came along, when it started. I mean, MLS as a organization, as a sports organization, is really an envy of the other leagues because of how they've basically been able to truncate the power of the player. I believe. I believe from a sports executive, I think they look at it as MLS has been succeeding at keeping the owners rich and the players not. I mean, that's my jaded belief.
But the issue is with other leagues, they're the best in the world. The other leagues in the United States are the best in the world. So you automatically have that. We're not the best in the world, and we also have a contract system where if players really want to, they can just leave and the clubs don't have to work with each other. Remember, Camilo left last year. It wasn't required that they paid him. They decided to pay him. They decided to work out a negotiation at the end, but he could have left because FIFA doesn't respect single-sided contracts. They allow them, but it's technically third-party ownership. So at one point, a lot of stuff's happening in FIFA. They really don't care about what's going on in the United States. For all we know, guess what? Sunil Gulati, you wanted to vote for another candidate. Now FIFA's going to change the contract rules. And guess what? Now MLS is completely out of the way. I mean, yes, this is speculation, but these contracts aren't always valid because of the single side of the contract and because of the lack of freedom of movement. So if they're really thinking long term and they're really considering being one of the top leagues, I'm not saying the top league, I'm not even saying the top 5 league, but a top league, they need to get modernized and need to figure out how to put themselves in a position to protect their assets in the long term against outside purchasers, outside buyers.
You raise great points there. I can only play devil's advocate so much. I mean, I agree. I try to look at it from the perspective of the owners, but I agree what you're saying. And the long-term success is definitely hinges on modernization and moving up the chain and becoming a more sought-after league. That way, you can retain these players and keep them. The Camilo, I do recall the Camilo thing. That was a fun transaction over the summer. Now, where's the fan in all of this? Who's representing the fan's voice? Is there a fan's voice? Do the fans even have a say in any of this?
Well, without games and without regular coverage, no. I mean, there's really nothing the fans could do outside of the games until they start playing. I mean, the only I guess situation where they can actually make their voice heard is if fans around the country, both of Canada and the United States, go to the CCL games in Montreal and in DC and protest outside the arena. Other than that, do you really think blogs going to work? Do you think they're going to care if all the podcasters go out there and say, well, I'm not going to follow, we're going to protest, we're going to talk about another league? No, they're not going to care because they're not big entities. But if there is a newspaper story from a paper who didn't cover MLS before, or a television camera outside of RFK for when DC United plays their CCL game, that might make noise. That might put a situation out there. And you know what? I wouldn't be surprised if the players will try to organize something like that and do something smart like that. Because that, to me, is the only voice they have right now is these CCL matches to really go out and voice their opinion and maybe protest outside or even have a TIFO inside the game.
Jay, you sneaky bastard. You brought it back to the media. I think that really envelopes really the whole month. What we've been talking about, the issues, the coverage. We really need to find a way to get national attention on the league, on the the inner workings of this league. And I think once the spotlight, if we can get the spotlight on there, however which way it happens, then I think they all kind of fall in line, and I think they know because they'll be scrutinized. We'll see. This will be this will be really interesting what happens in the next 7 days. I think it will set the tone. Obviously, I think it'll put the league in a direction, either upward direction, or it might keep it at a plateau. I don't think the league's going to decline, but I think it may be flat for the next 5 years if the wrong things happen on the negotiation table.
Would have to agree with that. I think, unfortunately, all the power lies in the owners. There's 20 of them. The votes are actually, sorry, at this point there's 22 of them. They have the votes, and despite what the right thing is, they're gonna pick the way they want to go.
All right, let's wrap up the show as we do in our traditional fashion. Traditional. I mean, it's a tradition now. We have our quick fire questions. I got a couple here lined up. Are you ready, Jay?
Let's go.
All right. Are you more interested to watch MLS preseason matches or summertime friendlies?
I think I'm more interested. And maybe this doesn't work for me because I'm a college soccer viewer, but I'm more interested in watching on TV preseason than the friendlies. Now, live, obviously, I'd rather watch Arsenal live. I'd rather watch Bayern Munich live. Then I'd rather, than go to a preseason game. But television-wise or sitting on my computer, I'd rather watch the preseason.
I don't like to agree with you. I don't. I want to be. I like to be contrarian. I think, but I think the distinction is the TV. I think you're right there with the distinction. I'm going to say I'm still more interested in watching the summer friendlies just because it's still more of a spectacle. Preseason matches, even for when and I think the summer friendly in the United States is the caveat, right? It's a summer friendly here because I don't enjoy the preseason friendlies for the European leagues that are abroad that I'm watching on TV. I think the caveat is literally, MetLife Stadium or Red Bull Arena or wherever it is you are in the country has two massive clubs that don't play here playing. I think that still is more interesting. But if I'm going to watch it on TV, I'd rather, I think, watch MLS preseason because it has more of an impact on my local supportership.
And there's guys actually trying. Like, they're literally trying to make a team. There's, the kids out there, pushing for a career. Where most of these guys are just trying to get fit or not get hurt.
Absolutely. Okay, second question. Here we go. Which expansion team is going to end up higher in the standings?
Did you watch the preseason game between Orlando City and NYCFC?
I saw the highlights. I did not watch the whole match.
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't. I think Kaká looked amazing. It was, it wasn't these full teams. But I think from the beginning, everyone's believing that it was going to be Orlando City was going to be the more close to finished product or close to MLS quality product when the season started. But as I'm watching this NYCFC team, I do kind of forget how good of a coach Jason Kreis is. And that alone makes me believe right now that NYCFC is going to be finishing higher in the standing just because if there is an issue down the road where the team falls flat, the team has problems with injuries, I think Jason Kreis knows how to maneuver around the league, knows how to find those guys, on the street to come in and fill gaps. I think his ability to be a great coach goes past, Orlando City's, better depth and probably better player in Kaká.
I'm still going to lean with Orlando. I think Orlando is going to have a fan base that's energized, that is raring to go. I think that's going to help them in the tough times. I think they're going to have supporters that are going to be there. They're going to push them on. I think it's going to be an interesting dynamic. I can't disagree that that Jason Kreis is not a phenomenal coach and probably will make New York City FC a great team to watch and they'll probably be a good team in the standings. I just I feel that when the times get really tough, if he can't do it, there's not the stands. I don't believe that the stands are going to be full of hardcore supporters. I think the stands may have people in them and it may be a full house, but I don't think. I guess it's hard to. I think the passion is contrived. Do you know what I mean? I think the Orlando City passion I think is not that it's that one is real and one is not real. You know what people feel is real, but I think the Orlando City fans have been building up. Where New York City FC, it's still they want to believe, but are they going to when the times get tough? So that's why my vote still stays with Orlando.
Your point about the home field is a great point. Not just the fans, because I was reading today, I believe it was Dan Dickinson of the Gotham. He had that the 60% of the people who purchased season tickets for NYCFC were the first time they've ever purchased season tickets for any sporting event, and that says something in a sense that there is a little bit of a fan experience or experiences that you know the proper time to stand up, you know the proper time to cheer, you know the proper time to give your energy, you know how to be intimidating, and everybody's like, oh, New York, they know how to be intimidating. Well, who knows how many people are actually coming from New York and not Westchester, or coming from New York and not Connecticut. Also, I think the biggest thing is we don't know how that field's going to play. We don't know how Yankee Stadium is gonna work out as a field for these teams. So I think you made a really good point about the home field advantage being the difference. I'm gonna stick with my point because I'm stubborn, but I'm gonna concede that that's a strong point.
Okay, here we go. Last question, and this is probably a 20-year-old question. Stemming back to the EPL. Who's it gonna be? Who's gonna have a better season, or who's gonna have a better half season rather? Steven Gerrard or Frank Lampard?
I'm going with Frank Lampard, and not because I don't believe that Steven Gerrard is a good player. I don't believe that Bruce Arena is going to know how to implement him in the system. It's that Steven Gerrard played pretty much the entire season, plus all the cup games, whereas Frank Lampard has been used here and there, and I think he's going to be fresher after a long EPL season rather than Steven Gerrard, who's going to probably be a little bit worn down, broken down, and doesn't really want to go, those first few months, go the extra mile for this new team.
I'm going to, this one we're going to agree. I'm going to agree that Lampard's going to have a better time, but I think for similar reasons, but I also think that Steven Gerrard is not aging as well as Frank Lampard. I mean, it's an awful thing to say about a soccer player, but I see him for Liverpool, and he's struggling a bit with the pace. And the part that's disconcerting is that when he's moved into a deeper position where that requires less of the athleticism and the sprinting, he just doesn't seem as comfortable. And I know that Bruce Arena is a guy that makes pieces work. He knows how to deploy guys in ways that's going to be to their advantage. But if Gerrard is deployed in a more advanced role where he doesn't have a lot of defensive responsibilities, which would be his preference, I believe, I don't think he's going to do well for the reasons that you stated, that he's going to be banged up from a long Premier League season. But also from an actual physical standpoint, I think the physicality and the speed of MLS is going to. I think it's going to be tough for him. I'm not saying he's going to be a bad player, but I don't think it's going to be Steven Gerrard. I don't think Steven Gerrard is going to tear apart the league as some would suspect.
Yeah, I think the one thing people do forget is that the league might not be technical. It's very fast, and I would like to see how Steven Gerrard goes against a team like Seattle, Sporting Kansas City, who plays fast and plays quick, and Sporting Kansas City presses, and same thing with Portland, who presses. Would he be comfortable in positioning, pressed a lot in the middle of the field, being the focal point of attention now in the middle of the field, for not just for his team, for the opposition? Would he be comfortable where Lampard like you said, he has a little bit more. His game can be a little more the late guy in the box. There's less responsibility on him, I think, with especially mixed disc crew coming in. So, I'm still sticking with Frank and everything except for NYCFC in Orlando. Yeah.
All right, guys. That wraps our show for the evening. Thank you very much for tuning in and listening to Homegrown. We appreciate all the listeners. We've had a step up lately. We see that you're downloading and you're listening, and we appreciate it. Thank you very much. If you have any feedback for us, please shoot us an email. You could reach me at SoccerYankDan on Twitter, or you can send an email to socceryanks@gmail.com. I manage that email account. For more podcasts similar to this one and some great content that we've been putting out on please visit socceryanks.com. Jay, if somebody wants to be in tune with the college soccer, where do they go?
They can go to my site, njcollegesoccer.com. I do more than just New Jersey. I'm doing more tri-state areas now, and I do branch out a little bit more into the NPSL and PDL.
Excellent. All right, folks. With that, we would like to thank you again.